Shall we move on to La Cérémonie then?
Must we?
Must we?
If you want to get to the end, we must.
Are we all going to be in agreement on this one?
The only way out is through.
We first meet Sandrine Bonnair's Sophie as she has an interview with the wealthy Catherine, Jacqueline Bissett, for a job as a housekeeper. She gets the job and moves into the large country house where Catherine lives with her husband Georges, Jean-Pierre Cassel, son Gilles, Valentin Merlet, and stepdaughter Melinda, Virginie Ledoyen. Despite Sophie being maddeningly unresponsive in conversation, things otherwise seem to go well at first, with her seemingly content and the family pleased with her work. Sophie is hiding a secret though, and it's not that her hair was cut by a 3-year-old when she fell asleep on the sofa, as that's plain for all to see. But rather that she's illiterate, which causes problems with some of the tasks she's, not unreasonably, asked to perform. Resentment of the family begins to grow in Sophie, something hugely encouraged by her new and only friend Jeanne, Isabelle Hubert, the village postmistress, who seems to fancy herself something of a class warrior, as well as a gossip monger, though it's entirely possible that all of the gossip was also created by her, as there's no evidence at all for the strange things she claims go on in the family's house. The first time I saw this film, I really liked it, and now I wonder if I was ill that day, but, just not aware of it, because in this viewing, I really didn't care for it at all.
You and me are even now, man.
Some of that may come down to a hatred of Sophie's hair. Not a particularly rational thing, I'll grant you. And some certainly comes down to a dislike for the inconsistency of Sophie's handicap. The shame she feels because of her inability to read and write is understandable, but we're supposed to believe she's smart enough to have hidden it for decades and held down similar jobs, yet too stupid to have worked out which coins are which and how money works. And when faced with something mildly vexing, locating a file on a desk, she hides in her room with the TV turned up like a sullen teenager. No. These childlike qualities are, it seems, supposed to serve to make her seem possible to manipulate by Jeanne, who herself acts like an overgrown child at times. She prods Sophie to stand up to the fascist oppression of her employers. Employers who, at worst, may be a little patronising. Happy to buy their new employee glasses and pay for driving lessons for her in addition to her wages. The monsters. And when Melinda helped Jeanne repair her broken down car, Melinda had the temerity to toss the hanky with which she removed some of the grime from the engine into Jeanne's car. Her own engine's dirt. Oh, these people, they're the worst. Viva la revolution. The crisis point comes when, given her actions in attempting to blackmail Melinda into silence after she discovers Sophie's secret, the family quite reasonably fire her. Returning to the house one evening with Jeanne to collect her things, they kill them instead. Why not? They were dressed up to watch opera and TV, the bourgeois pigs. Claude Chabrol's La Cérémonie takes its name from a ritual that preceded death by guillotine, and it does seem that class warfare, or at least class tension, like that of the 18th century is at the heart of the film. I've not read the Ruth Rendell novel A Judgment in Stone on which this is based, so I've no idea how much of that is in the source material, but in the end this film reached to me as a couple of arseholes murder some people. Though I'll mention again, I really did not feel that way the first time I watched this, and beginning to think I was not just watching a different film, may have been a different person.
Yeah, it's okay, because you're all right now, Drew.
What were the family guilty of? Obliviousness, perhaps? Not sufficiently checking their privilege? Maximilien Robespierre wrote, "The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant." When she discovers Sophie's secret, Melinda seems entirely certain that her father would help her get the help and education she needs to learn to read and write. Quel tyran! Off with his head! I have only seen this in one place, the New York Times as it happens, but I read there that Sandrine Bonnair said that Mr. Chabrol suggested she think of her character as a vegetable. She chose to imagine herself as a stiff and featureless leek. If I tell you that I find that uncannily accurate, you will perhaps understand why I find Sophie and the film so unsympathetic and unlikable.
When did you first watch this film, Drew?
A couple of years ago, I think.
Okay.
We had it mentioned on another podcast, and I thought, That
Sorry
sounds
to
interesting.
interrupt.
And I really like French cinema.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking like a long time in the past or anything like that. So it's a very quick turnaround.
When I read somewhere that this was about class struggle, I'm on board with that. Look, I'm very much Karl Marx's baby boy. If it's eat the rich, I'm there with a bib and knife and fork. I'm ready for it. But this ain't it, Chief. I think you maybe gave them a bit too credit by describing them as sullen teenagers, because this is toddler behaviour on their levels. And again, fitting with the motive of this film of characters I do not buy in the slightest. I do not buy these two in the slightest either.
So infantile, it's unbelievable.
Absolutely ludicrous that these people would function as human beings. So I suppose in that regard, it fits within the frame of the film when they just show up and go, oh look, now I've got shotguns, let's kill people. But in terms of it being a satisfying film, oh Lord, no. No, thank you.
Have you seen the reverence this is held in?
Yeah, the Guardian had this their 16th best crime film of all time.
Yeah, and the Cahiers du Cinema voted as like their best film of the year.
Like how? What? There's just these films where I feel like I've been sucked into a vortex where I'm in an alternate reality, or I've seen a different film from everybody else on the planet. Yeah. And this was definitely one of these films. It's like, what the hell? Why is anything of any consequence in this film at all? I just don't get it. This was an absolute struggle. Look, I mean, if we to be like fair to it for a reason, I suppose I don't really mind a lot of the acting performances in as much as they're doing what the script is telling them to do, and I don't mind the sort of technicalities of the production design, all that. That's all fine, but just the plot is nonsense. And all the characters are completely stupid, and I don't understand why anyone would give this. I don't know how generously you have to read this to make it any good at all, and it just puzzles me. It really does.
So I spent a lot of time thinking about this last night. I watched this last night, and look, my thoughts are this. Is it not the dichotomy of the French middle class that they will embrace the relative austerity of a modest 3-door family car, yet they will tolerate a 16-year-old boy sporting a ponytail and a cravat? Now, you
That's certainly a sentence. That is one of the most sentences you've ever said on Funds on Film, Craig.
That's right. I had borrowed Kate's iPad to watch this on because I thought, listen, Drew's spoken enough about this film. I know the regard it's held in. I'm not going to watch this on my phone. You know, being the big guy I am, I'd said to my wife, it's all right, you watch something on the television tonight. Can I borrow your iPad to watch this film? Because I didn't want to do it the disservice of watching it on my phone screen. And so I pressed pause, and it was a good 10 minutes of sullen contemplation before I even began to formulate my thoughts properly and actually write anything down. You guys know that I have long harboured suspicions about the French, right? And the way that people casually interact with each other in this movie does nothing to dispel that suspicion. From Sophie and Jean's increasingly infantile behaviour to the employee that you mentioned, Drew, at the patisserie who snatches your purse and indignantly asserts that you have the correct change and that's all right with you. The discordant behaviours at the peripheries of French society, one step abstracted from what the rest of the world would perceive as normality, right? I've been fortunate enough in my career to spend time both living and working in Germany and Holland on multiple occasions, and I embraced and was enriched by those cultures and their specific mores, but under no circumstances can I imagine myself doing the same in France. And if by some circumstance beyond my control such a commitment were required of me, I would embark upon it fearfully and with protest. As I have grown older, I have naturally assimilated more occasional instances of French popular culture, and my suspicion has tended exponentially toward fear. I worry that these behaviours represent a shared insanity, but it terrifies me to think it might actually be some form of 4D genius.
Can I just mention, I have lived in France for a short while. And while a number of the people I was surrounded with were expatriates from other countries, I still interacted with several French people who were all lovely and nothing like anybody in this film. And is one that was like some kind of weird issue with French popular culture and like media and things rather than the actual people, because they're not like that.
Right, your experience aside, man, I'm sorry. I respect the French as individuals, as I do all of my fellow humans, but in concert, I simply will not sanction this level of idiosyncrasy, Drew. If this movie has a message, it is this: do not come to France. This, more than any movie I've seen recently, this baffled me. And it's not that I've paid much attention. So an analogue, Isabelle Huppert for me is in the same sort of league as someone like Julianne Moore, right? But with Julianne Moore, I've paid a great deal of attention to her career. Whereas with Isabelle Huppert, I think I first became aware of her. I saw Hal Hartley's film Amateur in 1985. It was, I think, the first thing that I saw her in, and I was like, oh, right, okay. And initially, it was an attraction. I don't know. There's something I find very attractive about Isabelle Huppert, and on that terribly surface level, I paid some attention to her as an actor. And it's not that I have followed her career necessarily with a great deal of intent, but I've seen her in 3 or 4 films over the intervening years. And actually, was that not the same year as this? It was. So that's interesting. This is the first film I've seen Isabelle Huppert in where I actively despised her. And her performance, I'm not sure what this character, the purpose of either of these characters was. I just find that behaviour so bizarre and infantile from the off that I just completely detached from any sort of narrative propulsive intent. Am I supposed to agree with these characters? Am I supposed to at least sympathise with their actions ultimately? Because from what I could see, yes, the family were privileged, certainly, but I don't think they were leveraging that privilege in a particular way. I think you said, Drew, perhaps on occasion they came across as a little bit patronising, but they were not the poster childs for murdering the middle class. And in particular, the kids, I thought, were suspiciously well adjusted and did not behave in a particularly privileged way. They were engaging with other adults, and I'm sorry, who's was it Jean, the main character again? Sorry.
Sophie's the maid.
Sophie, sorry. They both engaged with Sophie on like a sort of a very honest. They were very honest interlocutors when they.
Yeah. Well, look at Virginie Ladien's character, Melinda. She's this rich person, or you assume she is, she's not got like the most expensive car or anything, but she's able to fix cars, you know.
Yes.
And then she's just
she's empathetic.
Yeah, and she's in the kitchen with Sophie, and when she discovers that she's
illiterate, yep.
Illiterate,
that's all right.
My illiteracy, I can remember the word there.
The irony.
Yes. They're sitting in the kitchen, and she's quite caring, and she's like, immediately like, yeah, my dad will help you get help for that. And she was like, because she was smart enough to realise what it was.
She's immediately sympathetic, and even if her response is one of privilege, which is, my dad can fix that, it was out of sympathy and out of care. It wasn't out of the need to leverage her social standing over Sophie's.
But not suddenly I'm going to blackmail you and I'll kill you in 30 minutes, you know? It's like, yes, weird.
Absolutely mental. Hard-boiled mental. This film bored me up until the last 5 minutes, where it absolutely terrified me and confirmed all of my suspicions about an entire nation.
We could never know them. We could never trust them.
I don't know. This movie left me thinking, because in later years, I know it's been a bit of a joke, and I do say these things jokingly. Of course, I don't hold anything against the French, and I myself have leveraged that as a sort of comic medium with you guys in particular over the years. I've had this sort of faux suspicion of of the French, but there was a real danger that this film almost called it into reality. And I don't know if there's a. I came away from this film, and do you know what my biggest takeaway was? I'm like, oh, right, okay. I don't know if French culture is this different, because in the same way the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima has sent shockwaves through Japanese culture for decades after, is this behaviour some sort of function of Nazi occupation? The Dutch were occupied also, and I spent 3 months living and working there, and was, had no suspicions about their cultural mores whatsoever. But this is, I don't know, man. Do you know what? If this had just been a boring film with two really unsympathetic and frankly unbelievable lead characters, I would have left it at that. The real sort of worrying, resounding bell for me was to then, having formulated my thoughts on it, to then have pursued an avenue of inquiry into the critical respect that this film commands, and really have never felt so at odds with critical opinion. I honestly safely think this is the most I have been at odds with critical opinion on a film in my entire life, where I genuinely can't understand. Yeah. Where you can often sort of disagree and perhaps, well, look, maybe I didn't enjoy this film, but on a technical filmmaking level, I can understand why this is revered, or in terms of what this film is hoping to achieve in social commentary, I get why people are relating to this film or have taken some sort of enjoyment from it. I am at a total loss.
Yeah, I'm looking at all the things people are praising it for and saying that the great characters and stuff, and then like how it's great that Closure Brawl had given like just enough hint in the idea that that they're saying that they've had trouble hanging on to a maid before, so maybe the maid just didn't like living that far out of town, and like there was absolutely innocent suggestion
maybe any one of a million reasons why that might not have worked out. Yeah,
just enough hints there. It's like, no, there's no information there. That is absolutely nothing.
That is willfully projecting intent upon something about which you have already made up your mind.
Yeah, you've decided that this is special, and you should try and find a way to justify it being special.
Exactly. That is not something that I guarantee you those same critics would allow almost any other film away with.
Yeah. I feel like the way it feels like if that film had turned into something like Mikhail Haneke's Funny Games or something, and they just took the family hospital, that would work actually. Mm-hmm. You could see the way that film would go. Like they just became, but like no, the way it happens, like I don't know.
I feel we had very similar reactions back in the day when we did that French New Wave episode, which Gibraltar, of course, is part of as well. And I think a lot of the films we covered then, we had similar reactions to it. Like, I cannot understand why this is valued. And certainly that's the way I feel about it.
Apparently.
Yeah. Yes, I think this film is being read with a generosity that it cannot possibly support in a vacuum, and it just felt like nonsense to me.
I was also sort of baffled as to, it just seems like, we just need to close the loop on the character as to why we can expect Sophie's character to get away with this at the end. The whole sort of contrivance of the daughter having started recording on her birthday present boombox, and that playing out as the credits, just like, oh, look, an alibi, or certainly evidence that suggests it was purely Isabelle Huppert character, whose name I cannot be bothered remembering. Was she Jeanne? Who?
She was Jeanne.
Oh, she was Jeanne, right? Okay, okay, that sets her up, and it lets Sophie off the hook. By that point, I don't care. That was entirely superfluous, because you've demonstrated such nihilism up to this point, these characters, that it seems bizarre to me to suggest that Sophie would care about whether she got away with this act or not. At what stage does someone committing that act to, care about whether or not they're going to get away with it? It was so detached from any reality.
Her voice is on that tape as well, and she's just standing right next to the police. Yeah, it's like she clearly doesn't care.
I think we can all agree it's a stupid film. Let's move on.
Yes.
Well, it was worth talking about. Right.
if not watching. But yes.
Yes.
Okay. I worry
We've
that a
done
lot.
that hard work for you, listeners.
Yes, I worry that a lot of that was rum-fueled anti-French rhetoric on my part, but at least we're all in broad agreement that,
Yes.
yeah, the film was
Yeah. And I haven't had anything to alcoholic to drink in weeks, so it's definitely not that for me.
well, on Tonight of All Nights, we're recording on an hour and a quarter from New Year's Eve, listeners. So on Tonight of All Nights, Drew, you'll be indifferent to know that I am making up that ground for you.